So I just heard they're coming out with a new Predator movie, and I was really excited at first because I was hoping someone would finally make another good one. But then I read what it was about, and I guess Hollywood didn't learn anything from the past few years because this movie is gonna be more woke garbage. They haven't started filming it yet, but I can pretty much guarantee it's gonna be trash because the synopsis has the word patriarchy in it. The story will follow Key, a Comanche woman who goes against gender norms to become a warrior in a time before any Europeans had encroached on their lands. As capable as any man in the tribe, Key has always been a source of inspiration. She's a truth teller and a tomboy and wants to prove herself in the masculine world of the Comanche. I already told you that these female remakes are just lipstick on a pig because Hollywood can't creatively come up with any new ideas, so they just take dead or dying franchises and switch the genders.
Excuse me, it's ma'am.
But this isn't the problem with the Predator franchise, because even with such an amazing concept, no one can seem to make another good movie. Now I know it's almost impossible to capture the magic of the first one, but the one thing everyone likes about it is the format. It started off like a classic 80s big muscle action flick, but then it turned into a sci-fi survival thriller out of nowhere. And I think a much better story can be told in a sequel, but no one even tried to use this formula, and the Predator went from being invisible most of the time to not even trying to be stealthy at all. And I've played all the games, and I even used to read the comics, so I know there's a lot of interesting stories that can be told in this universe, but I think the reason it's so hard to make another good movie is because the Predator wasn't supposed to be real in the first two.
Bullshit!
And I say that because the Predator wasn't that important to the structure of the movie. And you could just remove it completely from the story and it would just be about soldiers trying to make it back to the chopper, or a cop trying to catch a killer in downtown LA. The movie's plot would have been exactly the same no matter what it looked like or what the backstory was, because almost all the explanation and backstory about the Predator was made up after the movie. And it's strange that even though they had such a small cast, the Predator didn't even show up in the end credits. When I first noticed this, I thought it would be cool if the reason we couldn't see it was because of the name was camouflaged like the Predator, but I knew that was way too clever and I was giving them too much credit, but maybe it was the director's subtle way of telling us that there wasn't actually a Predator in the movie. And this only applies to the first two and not the others because they're all split up into 3 different groups. In the originals, the Predator was mysterious and menacing and mostly stayed in the shadows. In the Alien crossovers, they were bulky and clumsy and they basically turned into mascots for the franchise. Then there was the reboots, where they tried to add so many new concepts to a character that we didn't know anything about in the first place. They all of a sudden had different races and pets and secret planets to hunt on, but we didn't even know the basic details about them. All 3 of these take a very different approach to the Predators because sometimes they're like samurais and other times they're like mercenaries. But in the first 2, they were more like slashers because they liked to wait until each person was alone so they could sneak up on them from the shadows. And this is why a lot of people think the originals felt like a horror movie. I explained in my Outpost video why I didn't think it could be a horror movie because one of the requirements for the genre is you have to be afraid for the characters. And it's kind of hard to be afraid for a group of special ops mercenaries that just did a Leroy Jenkins on 100 guerrilla soldiers without even breaking a sweat. But the more I thought about why these movies are so hard to make, the more I started to think that maybe they were supposed to be horror movies, but they just had a lot of action. The same way the first 2 Terminators, Jurassic Park, and Alien movies are all full of action and science fiction, but they're honestly horror movies at the core. All these franchises started to fall off after the second movie because every sequel after that became more action and less horror. The horror basically got thrown out completely because Hollywood would rather make a big dumb action movie because they require the least amount of skill to write. So for the sake of this idea, I'll accept that The Predator is a horror movie. But instead of it being an elusive slasher like Jason Voorhees, I think The Predator takes place in the same universe as the Blair Witch.
You never were that smart.
The Blair Witch Project is about a group of students who go into the woods to film a documentary about a local legend called the Blair Witch. And after a few days in the forest, they all get lost and they start to hallucinate. Book of Shadows picks up years later and it follows a group of people going on a Blair Witch tour that end up killing each other after having a mass hallucination. The writer even said that he wrote this as a meditation on mass hysteria because the entire Blair Witch concept is supposed to leave us asking if something supernatural is making them kill each other, or if it's just a shared delusion. So on one hand, the Blair Witch could be a malevolent spirit that lives in the woods, or it could have a scientific explanation, and just be a condition similar to PTSD. So you wouldn't have to be in the woods for it to affect you, you could fall victim to it anywhere as long as the conditions were right. We spend the whole movie thinking this place is haunted, but when we see the video recordings, it shows that everything we saw in the movie was wrong. Like, we thought this girl hung herself, but the tape showed that her boyfriend did it because he thought she was a witch. Or the goth girl went to buy beer and she didn't remember that she stabbed the cashier. I actually like this one more than the first one, and I don't think we give it enough credit for trying to expand the story and not just making it about finding more videotapes in the woods. The Blair Witch is basically the same as the Babadook or Bagul or the Bye Bye Man. She never actually kills anyone herself, she just influences other people to do it. Now I think The Predator is a perfect movie, and the alien design is one of the coolest things I've ever seen, but there's a few unanswered questions that seriously make me think The Predator was just an hallucination in the first two movies. Dutch is the one that comes up with the idea that the Predator won't kill you if you don't have a weapon, even though he seems pretty okay with killing people that don't have one. This just feels like Dutch making up a reason why Anna shouldn't have a gun, because if he really believed that the invisible man in the jungle won't kill him, why didn't he just drop his gun and walk to the chopper? This was the question that led to this whole idea for me, because this is the only real flaw in the movie. We could just say that it's plot armor, or maybe it's just a genuine mistake, but if we're gonna try to make this make sense on a story level, the only thing that would make sense is that Dutch pretended to get shot so Anna would run away and he can go back and get something that he didn't want anyone else to know about. And if he pretended to get shot, that means the Predator isn't real. Anna started this whole idea that an invisible demon was hunting the group, and she tells a story about how they find people skinned in the jungle every year. Billy's the first one to fall victim, and he starts to get paranoid that something in the jungle is watching him. Then Mac, and then Dutch, and Dylan, and everyone in the group starts to share the same hallucination. This scenario is exactly what happens in the Blair Witch movies too. Someone gives a creepy explanation, and then the entire group starts to suffer the same delusion. In all the other movies, there's really no questions or mystery when the Predator kills someone. But in the first two, it seems like all the deaths could honestly be blamed on something other than the Predator. That seems like it could be possible, right? Even in the second movie, it seems like Mike Harrigan could be the one killing people because he's always hyper aggressive, and everywhere he goes, people get killed by something that no one can see but him. The Predator was never meant to be a franchise character, and the reason everyone fell in love with the first movie was because we all knew it was about something deeper. It was never about baby oil mercenaries fighting against an alien with futuristic technology. It was about a group of men getting lost in the jungle and falling victim to the Blair Witch.